when somebody is ready to try to get off drugs, they have those options readily available. And this will also help with our public safety needs because it's all connected.
Well, that's citywide council member Sarah Nelson from the Seattle Channel's world-famous program Council Edition, released last week, talking about her push to fund more addiction treatment in the council's budget. So where's that proposal going? What about other services needed as the city winds down the COVID emergency? And why is the city's redistricting commission wanting to split up one of Seattle's oldest neighborhoods? Well, all these topics and so much more on Seattle News, Views, and Brews this week, your Coffee Break Political Podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are my own. My co-host David Croman is a new dad. Congrats, David. Enjoy some time off. And subbing in is none other than Kevin Schofield, weekly columnist for the South Seattle Emerald, and so many other great things. Kevin, I just wanted to throw it out there. Any words of advice for David, just thinking back to those early days of fatherhood? I always subscribed to the idea of taking a nap when the kids did because sleep could be very scarce. But any thoughts for David, our friend here?
Well, I mean, you and I are both dads as well, so we've both gone through this. I went through this a long time ago. My daughters are 31 years old, so I have twin daughters, and my experience with twins is a little different than most people's experience. I will say the one best piece of advice that I got, when you can do it, mom and dad should take turns on baby duty at night.
Yep.
You can survive if you're getting a good night's sleep, every couple days. Mm-hmm. But if neither mom nor dad is getting a good night's sleep ever, if you're both up every single night with the baby, then you're all going to go crazy within a few weeks. So you got to figure out a way to occasionally get 8 hours of sleep a night.
Got to put on your own oxygen mask first, as difficult as that may seem. It's an important thing. Kevin, thank you as always for doing the show. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. And thanks to all of our patrons for your support. If you're a listener, please do become a patron. Join at the $10 level, become part of our mug club. And I got to tell you, only 2 of these limited edition mugs left. So jump in and support some civic affairs programming. Our mug shot of the week, Emma. And Emma sent this one in. A mug surrounded by leaves in the yard. Yes, 'tis the season for a whole lot of raking as fall is finally upon us. Thank you, Emma, for your support. Be cool, everybody. Like Emma, become a patron at Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Finally, a big thanks to Converge Media. The video version of the podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get going right here, right now. Well, here we go back to the budget, Kevin. And as we speak, the council is in the process of releasing its amendments to the budget. We're going to see that this week. They've separated things out by city departments. So at the start of this week, discussion on some of the perhaps less complex issues here surrounding Seattle Center, arts and culture, for example. But then we wrap up the deliberation phase on Thursday as the council listens to amendments regarding the Community Safety Communications Center, the Human Services Department, Seattle Police, and the Department of Transportation, some big ones there. Kevin, I wanted to break this down because we're going to talk about redistricting later in the show, but this is the time when council members are really pushing for earmarks for their specific districts. Let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, and first let's just be clear. This is proposed amendments this week.
True.
They're not going to vote on what's really going to end up in the budget for another
couple weeks,
3-4 weeks, something like that. But this is the first week they roll out all their spending wish list, right? Of all things, and right now there isn't a lot of money to spend. In fact, by tradition, the mayor spends all the money that's out there and doesn't leave like a pot of money for city council members to spend on things that they want. So, to some extent, the city council has to either find additional revenues or cut things in the mayor's budget if they want to spend more money on different things. But this is a week where they roll out their first sort of wish list of all the stuff that's out there, and it's a political process, and it's, I think, in some ways particularly political this year because the 7 district-based city council positions are all up for election next year, right?
That's right.
And the the primary election will be in May, and the general election will be the first week of November, which will be before the 2024 budget is done.
Right.
So what they get into the budget this year is the thing they're going to be campaigning on next year. Right.
It's a very good way to look at it.
So we're going to see a lot of district-based earmarks on this for transportation and street and sidewalk projects, for parks. And it'll be interesting also to see, since we're doing this redistricting and they're, 99% down, we're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit in a little while later. When we see district-based council members propose earmarks, are they proposing them for their current district or for the district they're going to have? Right? It sure looks like a bunch of Magnolia is going to end up in District 6 starting next year. So District 7 right now. So are we going to see the District 6 based Councilmember Dan Strauss proposing earmarks for Magnolia, or are we going to see District 7 based Councilmember Andrew Lewis proposing some, or maybe he doesn't propose anymore for Magnolia anymore? Right?
Yeah.
What is the political calculus around all of that? Right?
Yeah. It's a split neighborhood right now with the way the redistricting council has it. But keep going. Yeah, so we haven't yet seen what proposed amendments are going to be for some of the bigger kind of high-profile things like the police department and some of the departments like the parking enforcement officers, the community safety and communication center, center, because those are coming at the end of the week. We'll see those probably on Wednesday, this week. So we don't really know kind of how much effort they're putting in that, but what we've seen so far with kind of the smaller departments for the starting, pretty tame stuff this year. They know there isn't a lot of money out there. And so a lot of them are going to be, kind of saving up their wishes for things they probably have a better chance of getting. One of the interesting aspects of how this works at this stage is any proposal needs to be have 3 city council members' names attached to it. So sort of one main sponsor and 2 co-sponsors. So it's interesting to see sort of which ones are teaming up and which ones are not teaming up. Where there's some horse trading, I will support your amendments if you support mine. Going to be plenty of that.
So we're gonna see a lot of that this week and see where the who's banding together to try to get stuff to get through.
Thank you for breaking all those pieces down. I wanted to shift gears ever so slightly here and just touch on what Councilmember Sarah Nelson was talking about at the top of the show here. Drug addiction treatment, I should say. She wrote an op-ed about this in the Seattle Times, noting that substance use disorder can be a precursor and an outgrowth of chronic homelessness, a contributor to public safety problems. So she's proposing a $2 million pilot program to fund direct addiction treatment. And I think this is significant, Kevin, because she's talking about treating people to end their addiction rather than the harm reduction model that most of our public health agencies are working with right now, using methadone, et cetera, to help people manage their addictions and stop overdose deaths. But what do you make of what she's saying? Because there was also a city auditor report about this, too, very recently. What's going on with it?
And the city auditor report, which just came out earlier this week, it is a little different aspect of this. So we actually have, in some ways, 2 different substance abuse issues going on, public health issues going on. One is around opioids, including the biggest one, fentanyl at the moment. And the second one is around methamphetamines, which are stimulants. They're not opioids. And really in the last 2 years, a number of overdoses around both of those have absolutely skyrocketed.
Both drugs skyrocketed, yes.
Overdoses both being a serious medical issue in themselves, because that's people dying from them essentially most of the time. But also sort of a proxy of the larger use of both of those, right? So opioids continue to go up. Stimulants, particularly methamphetamines, are also going up. And the treatment for them is different. So what the auditor's office was saying was, you really need to look, let's not get 100% kind of tunnel vision on opioids. It's a serious, serious problem. But we have another one here, and it requires a different kind of treatment program, of which we have very, very little in King County right now.
Right.
So the auditor's office is saying we should be working on making sure that we have treatment programs for methamphetamines as well. But Councilmember Nelson makes a good point about opioids as well, right? That buprenorphine and the other methadone, those sorts of things are good tools. In some ways, are harm reduction. There's some debate about, particularly for people who have been addicted to opioids for a long time, how much their physiology changes and whether they can actually be cured of it. And there's a strong belief in parts of the medical community that after a certain point, people can't be cured. That they're not going to go through this treatment program and come out clean and be clean for the rest of their lives. That their body has physiologically changed to the point where their body is going to crave opioids for the rest of their life.
Right. That's a big part of what addiction
a
is.
program, a methadone program, something like that, is something that they're going to be using for the rest of their
reliant
life.
on. Right? Yeah.
And that's not everybody who ever uses them, but
right.
There's certainly a belief, again, in the medical community that for some opioid addicts, that is what their life is going to be for the rest of their life. So then it comes back to sort of how do we manage that medically?
Right.
Is, we certainly want to have treatment programs, as Councilmember Nelson is saying, so that a set of people who have not reached that threshold point yet can get treated and get clean and be clean forever. But there's also going to be a set of people who that is not going to work for as well.
Right.
But so, I mean, we can take the larger point from Councilmember Nelson that we need to broaden out the way we think about the medical solutions that we're providing for the set of people in our community who have substance abuse issues right now.
Okay.
Right. Either side, methadone, stimulants, or opioids. And let's not just sort of continue to carry a set of people along, with the BUP kind of maintenance programs if we really can treat them. But overall in King County, we still don't have anywhere near the amount of the capacity that we would need for the number of people who are addicted to substances here. Right. It's not even close.
And I just see this playing out, and this is an old debate, Kevin, that's been going on for decades here, this idea of harm reduction versus some sort of abstinence type of treatment, if you want to call it that. And I guess what Councilmember Nelson is saying, and maybe some people in the health community would agree with this, we need both of these approaches going forward. Is that what you're kind of reading here?
Yeah. And the other political problem around this is that King County is the one who's supposed to be responsible for this whole space, the whole substance abuse treatment and management place, not the city of Seattle. And Councilmember Nelson is basically standing up and saying, what she's not saying, but she's saying with actions is, they're not getting the job done, right? The city of Seattle needs to be, stepping up and doing more on our own for this, right? And not relying on King County. Now, King County Executive Dale Constantine has stepped up recently and said, okay, we're going to sort of do some more. A lot of what he's been doing is throwing money at trying to preserve the capacity that exists right now, which is not enough, but is under threat. And a lot of, and some of the places have been closing down. So a lot of what he's trying to do is stop the places that exist now from closing down. And he's making, he said some words about sort of growing it, but finding locations for these places, and in particular finding the staff to run these places, because the people who are qualified medically to run these kinds of programs are very few and far between, right? And they're in extremely high demand, right?
Yeah. And when you talk about, at least, let me jump in here, just with what the city's going through here, potentially, at least what the mayor has proposed, not raising those salaries of those human services department workers or what have you. I know there's some concern about this, just providing enough workers to get in the mix here. I want to throw
let's be clear about that. So, and this is a nuanced thing. So, what the city council passed a couple of years ago was an ordinance saying that that workers on human services contracts, their salaries needed to have cost of inflation raises every year.
Tied to inflation,
tied to inflation. What the mayor's budget that proposed this year was, because an inflationary raise this year would be like 9%, 10%, something like that.
Right.
What he's saying is and proposing in his budget is that there's no way the city budget can sustain that large increase. Yeah. So what he's saying is, let's smooth that over a couple of years. So we'll max it at 4% a year. But we will sort of, you can do the max out, even if, inflation next year is supposed to be kind of closer to 2%, but they can do 4% this year and 4% next year and whatever they do next year to eventually get caught up, but no more than 4% a year, just to kind of smooth it. So nobody is saying, and
we're
again,
cutting.
This is nuance. Nobody is saying we're cutting them. Nobody's saying we're keeping them at the current level. They're just saying we just have to grow it slower because we can't whipsaw the budget every year with that. And, the counter argument to that is, but those workers are getting whipsawed anyway by inflation. right?
Right.
So,
right.
and certainly the city government has more capacity to manage that kind of whipsawing than individual, human services workers can do that.
Right. It's important. It's just part of this overall conversation about providing the amount of people that are needed for these programs. And that's an ongoing challenge. I think we have to be real about that. All right. We need to work on something up next here, Kevin, that I want to break down. We actually had one of our patrons write to us about this. Can the city of Portland pull off a plan to ban unauthorized camping on its streets? A new approach to a thorny problem for the Rose City. Coming up on Now Hear This. Well, we received a message from one of our patrons who chooses to remain anonymous as a supporter of the show. Thank you for your patronage. Drink, Drank, Drunk, a great online handle there. Our patron was asking for a look into Portland's recently announced plan to ban unauthorized camping on public streets and move people who are homeless into designated campsites. Mayor Ted Wheeler says arresting people will not be the first option, but if there's someone who digs in and refuses to go to a designated shelter, they could face a citation. However, and here's where it gets a little heavy. That citation could be erased if people agree to get some assistance. Here's what Wheeler said.
Actually waive those citations in exchange for services such as mental health or substance abuse treatment services. That's the ultimate goal here. It's not to penalize people.
Well, Kevin, there's quite a bit to unpack here. The mayor wants 3 city-authorized campsites housing 100 to 125 campers in place before winter hits. He says he's got some sites in mind already. He will need some funding for that, though. Doesn't have that yet, and there's going to take some county and state support. But I just wanted your overall take on this plan from our neighbors to the south. What do you make of it?
Okay, well, so there's a bunch of parts. Let's just start with the basic legal basis of this. A few years back, there was this Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, Martin versus Boise, in which the Ninth Circuit said the city of Boise had passed basically an ordinance criminalizing sleeping on park benches and sidewalks and things like that. And Ninth Circuit said you can't do that unless you're actually providing an alternate place for people to be, because they have the right, they have to be somewhere. You can't criminalize them just being somewhere
because they're homeless.
Unless there's somewhere else that's okay and you're willing to sort of allow them to be there. So if Mayor Wheeler wasn't creating these additional sanctioned encampment spots, then or shelters, or however they're going to end up being, he would not be able to criminalize being homeless on the streets of Portland at all, right?
Right.
And he doesn't have those in place yet. So to the extent that their current shelters in the city are at capacity, he can't do this. So he's got to get the shelters first. I haven't heard yet sort of what these are really going to look like. Are these going to be, we've talked a few times in this city and other cities as well about setting up like really large tents, right? That could house, cities. Or just like the mega tents you see, like big events. And things like that.
Tacoma experimented with a few of those. Keep going.
The places that have tried them, have kind of had a tough time with them. Locating them is hard for a couple of reasons. One is, as Mayor Wheeler is saying, you ideally want them, not way out of sight, out of mind, but someplace where services are going to be nearby. So either you need to bring all the services that homeless people need to those locations, or you need to site them in a place where they're close to all the other services, housing services, substance abuse treatment services, all those things. Schools, if they're a family, all that stuff. So you got to have all this stuff together. And as we just saw with, Pioneer Square in the Chinatown International District, the city and county's attempt to set up kind of a homeless services hub in that area, right near where there's a lot of homeless people, got substantial pushback from the community.
It's not happening, right?
So he may say, I've got some sites in mind for this, but that doesn't mean he's going to be able to actually get those things set up in those places, right? So he's got that issue around that, and then there's kind of the larger issue beyond that of like, are we just warehousing the homeless by doing this? Are we really, is the intent really to help them? And can they get sort of the services to scale? Is it going to really be any better for people in these mega tent shelter places than where they are right now? Right? Is it going to be safe?
Out of sight, out of mind?
How much police security they're going to need there? Are they going to have staff there 24/7?
Yeah.
One would hope that they would have clean water and bathrooms and
Sure.
other kind of sanitary services there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always set those up, right, in those
Yeah.
places. Is there going to be, cooking facilities so people can, keep and make food for themselves? Are they always going to have to go somewhere else for food? It turns out logistically, these are pretty hard, right?
Yeah.
And the whole issue about, are we warehousing homeless people? That also the head of the King County Regional Homeless Authority has raised those same issues about our tiny home villages.
Tiny house villages. Yeah.
Are we basically just sticking homeless people in sheds?
Right.
So
again, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's not just a matter of like, can we set up a place and put them there? It's like, is that actually? Are we actually helping them?
Is it effective?
Or are we just trying to move them to somewhere else where we don't have to see them every day?
Right. And I think about this project overall, what it's going to cost, because Mayor Wheeler did not have an exact figure on that, didn't have anything even close. Clearly, it would need county, it would need state support. I saw some, at least from what I was reading, rather lukewarm reception from those different levels of government there. And even some of the advocates out there, advocates for people who are homeless, had some concerns about this too. And I think that it's an experiment that I think Portland is working with. Portland City Council is wrestling with this week, and we'll see where they go with it. But I think there's so many question marks around this, Kevin.
Yeah, for the cities who try these sorts of things, they are hard and they are expensive, and that doesn't mean they'll fail. Portland could be successful at doing this, right?
Yeah.
But nobody should fool themselves into thinking, we'll set up a big tent and it'll be great. Right. It is really, really hard and is really expensive to do these.
Yeah. All right. I want to track down another trend we're looking at here, trying to bring emergency mode to a close regarding the COVID pandemic here in the city of Seattle. I read about these two issues in Councilmember Lisa Herbold's newsletter. First, we're talking about food delivery. That premium pay for food delivery gig workers ends next week on November 1st. Sick leave, that paid sick time for food delivery and transportation network gig workers, Uber, etc., that ends 6 months after the end of the city's emergency proclamation. So that will be April of next year, but at least the transportation network drivers have a new state sick leave plan starting up in January. And Kevin, this is just one of these situations where after 2 years plus of emergency mode, it's easy to get used to the idea of higher pay. And now it's going away along with other programs like some renter protections. So what happens now, I guess, is my big question.
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge. Some of the local politicians who push really hard for pushing a lot of these things through are going to get a lot of pushback when they go away. And they have already. They're getting pushback from unions. They're getting pushback from advocacy organizations. And, this is not new territory, right? You can look back at things like rent control, right? And one of the problems with rent control is that for the people that they help, and they don't necessarily help every tenant or, every person looking for housing, but for the people that rent control has helped, it's almost impossible to take it away, right?
Yeah.
The city after city and county and state that have imposed rent control and then discovered the problems that came along with it, found that when they actually tried to take it away, the pushback was so extreme that they got stuck with it for years, some cases decades after that, right? So we're going to see the same thing with this, right? On one hand, the people who are benefiting from the sick leave, which and it's been a real benefit during the pandemic.
Yes, you bet it has.
People who have benefited from premium pay, for grocery workers, right? And again, it's been a real benefit for them. It's been a help for a lot of them, particularly in the early days when there were personal costs to doing this and a lot of personal risk for working in a grocery store. If you think back what it was like 2 years ago, right? There were hazard pay was really appropriate at that point in time. But taking these things away is going to hurt them. Now, the flip side of that is right now at this very moment, unemployment is a record low, right?
Yeah.
Employers are having a hard time hiring people, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
It may be that the government no longer mandates these, but a lot of employers who want to keep their employees are going to keep something like this in place anyway. So it may be that, and I don't know that for sure. I'm sure there'll be employers who'll get rid of them at the first opportunity. But some who decide, hey, it's more important in my business to keep my workers, may decide that they're going to keep these in place. Or maybe a smaller version of them. Well, so I don't think it's clear yet. I think there may be a couple of iterations on how this plays out once the government mandate goes away for these.
Wow, it's going to be interesting to see how our local economy responds to that. I know these are all issues that are floating around the city's budget process as they work on ending some of these programs right now. So a lot still to consider there. And thank you, Kevin, for breaking those pieces down. All right, so coming up, we're shifting gears from transportation talk into a look into what's happening with the City of Seattle's redistricting process. We're going to tell you what's happening on What's Next. Kevin, you and I have been tracking the city's work on redistricting for the past year plus, and there was a bit of a twist last week. The commission voted 4-1 to approve a map with 7 districts, which we have, that keeps most of our neighborhoods intact, except for Magnolia in the northwest area, which would be split between districts 6 to the south and 7 up there in that northwest part of the city. There are more meetings this week. Ideas could shift and change possibly, but Kevin, I just wanted your take on what the commission is considering here.
Yeah, they're getting down to the end game here, right? And I think, for anyone who hoped that this entire process could be apolitical, your hopes are pretty much dashed at this point, right?
Right.
And if anything, this is a demonstration that, of how Seattle politics works, right? That for better or for worse, small groups of advocates can, have an outsized voice and an outside impact on what's going on. We've seen the redistricting commission get whipsawed back and forth on, their first plan, sliced up Magnolia through the middle. And they got a lot of pushback on that. And they came back with a plan that kind of fixed that, but actually kind of sliced up Fremont.
Yeah, and right. Into three districts, right.
Yeah, and, that wasn't completely unreasonable when I step back and look at it, and I don't live too far away there, so I'm kind of familiar with that area. The area of Fremont that they proposed to pull into District 7 has a lot more in common with kind of the Nickerson area just south of the Fremont Bridge than, the really industrial part of Ballard to the west of it. Sure. And the kind of lower Wallingford area to the east of it. So you could argue that way, and there's no perfect solution to this, right?
Yeah.
So what's now happened is, after pushback from different advocacy organizations, they've unrolled most of that last change that they did, that reunited Magnolia. So they got to split through Magnolia again. They undid the part of sort of pulling part of Fremont down into District 7. That's back in District 6 again. So, you can see them just sort of being pulled backwards and forward and trying to find out, as far as Magnolia goes, there are good arguments on both sides of this, right? Magnolia, as a neighborhood, is like, I think I looked it up, it's like 14,500 people, and it's a big space. To say, well, that's one neighborhood that may not be divided, that's really pushing the edges of credibility, right?
A tough one. And I never thought that really fit with linking it up with downtown and District 7 anyway. I mean, just throwing it out there. They're very, very different areas, downtown and Magnolia. But that was the connection we had originally, and now we're dealing with something different.
Yeah, and the geography of that space, and the connection to Inner Bay. Inner Bay itself is very different from Magnolia.
Yeah.
Right? And they're right next to each other. So it's just, that's definitely one of the places where there's sort of complications. And there are a few other kind of last minute tweaks that they've done to the map, sort of putting all of Eastlake back together again. That's probably the most significant of the other tweaks. And there's just other kind of small ones. They did a few other places just to make sure that they've got the boundaries of a neighborhood, exactly right. And most of that stuff, is just noise in it. But really, the big one was Magnolia and Fremont. Yeah, and they went one way, and they got a bunch of pushback, and they went the other way, and they got a bunch of pushback, and they went back to the first way again. And it's the politics of dancing in Seattle, right?
Yeah, and here we go.
So, but it looks like they're really down at the end game. I wouldn't expect much of any change from this point on. They've got about 2 weeks before they may get the map officially approved. I think they're going to be sort of really happy to be done with this at this point.
Oh yeah, no, they want to make sure that they do this and get it done before the deadline, because the state redistricting process, you don't want to do that all over again. That was awful. No. So off we go here. It's time to wrap up here, Kevin. It's still baseball season, and as much as it's like watching a horror movie, I am still watching the World Series. Do you think the Astros are actually going to lose a game this postseason? Can they pull off perfection and sweep by the Phillies too? What do you think, man?
Well, there are a whole bunch of other teams, who had completely dismissed the Phillies.
Yes. Yeah.
And
don't knock them.
Yeah, and I would also just observe that the Mariners did better against the Astros than the Yankees did better than the Yankees did against the Astros. So, obviously, I think if you check the Vegas odds, Astros are probably doing pretty well.
Yeah. I would imagine.
But don't count out the Phillies. They're the surprise team. They're the surprise team this year.
I love it. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware as a little kid, and the Phillies are my boys from way back. So we'll see what happens if the Philly fever takes over here.
Reese Hoskins is hitting homers all over the place. Bryce Harper seems to have found his groove, and a little humility for that matter. So anything could happen.
We'll see. Well, thank you, Kevin, as always, for stepping in to co-host the podcast. Much appreciated. And make sure you come back next week, everybody. Kevin and I will have a special guest coming on the show that might have a few things to say about redistricting Magnolia, maybe a few other things too. We'll have to see about that. Make sure you check it out. Thanks to everybody listening. It's Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. This podcast is on all the big platforms. Again, if you are a listener, support the show on Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callaman Media Services. Copyright 2022.